Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, What's Your Marketing ROI? We will talk about how to maximize ROI in career education. I'm Enrique Dutra, Director of Product Marketing here at Lead Square, and I'm thrilled to be your host and moderator today. Whether you're joining live or catching the replay, thank you for being here. We have got an incredible lineup of speakers and a really packed agenda designed, to help you unlock the secrets of driving better marketing ROI in career education. So before we dive in, let me quickly introduce myself. I recently joined Lead Square after spending the last 11 years in Silicon Valley, where I helped tech companies from fast-growing startups to big tech to bring B2B SaaS products to market. I'm really passionate about connecting dots between marketing technology and measurable outcomes, which is exactly what we're going to be doing and exploring here today. So now let's meet our amazing panel. First up, we have Charlie Parker, Vice Chancellor of Enrollment Management at Kaiser University. Charlie brings a wealth of experience in aligning marketing efforts with enrollment success, and I can't wait to hear his insights. Next, we have Gary Thorup, VP of Operations at MDT Marketing, and Gary's expertise in optimizing marketing spend I'm sure it's gonna help to shed a light on how schools can eliminate waste and optimize their marketing strategies. And last but not least, we have Nick Colombo from Gurnick Academy. Nick is a director of marketing there, and I'm sure that his hands-on approach to driving results in education marketing is gonna inspire us all. So welcome, Charlie, Gary, and Nick. Thank you so much. It's great to have you here. And before we jump into the discussion, I'd love, for each of you to tell us a bit more about yourselves. So, Nick, let's start with you. What else could you share about yourself and your work at Gurnick Academy?
Hello, all you wonderful people. I'm Nick Colombo, Director of Marketing at Gurnick. And, I think, well, first off, I'm actually in Enrique's backyard. Our campus just moved to San Jose. So we're in the heart of Silicon Valley, and I think it's an interesting place to be where technology and advancement is happening, but we're in a field with healthcare and education where sometimes it can be a struggle to keep up with the latest and greatest. And it's an interesting intersection to be at where there's an expectation that, hey, you should be on the cutting edge. There's new tech, there's new solutions out there. Let's test them, let's try them. So I think I'm very inspired by all of that activity happening in my backyard. In a little more detail, this is actually my first role in education at all. My background is actually digital marketing for agencies, similar to Gary, specializing in paid ads and things like that. And so taking a marketing first approach and applying it to an industry that, sometimes can get stuck in, well, education is supposed to be done this way. It's supposed to be promoted that way. And being able to kind of disrupt it a little bit has been interesting. So kind of excited to share a little bit of that later on, but that's me in a nutshell.
Perfect. Thank you, Nick. Great to have you here. And Gary, let's move over to you. Can you please tell more about yourself and your role at MDT Marketing?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. My name is Gary Thorpe. I'm VP of Operations at MDT Marketing. And we specialize in full funnel advertising solutions for institutes of higher ed. That's where we live. So everything that we do is focused on colleges and universities and helping them with student recruitment and retention. So I have been in the space for a very long time, over 18 years now. So a tremendous amount of time in this. And where I've spent most of my focus over the last few years is in building products that help convert inquiries at a higher rate. So what happens after an inquiry is generated for an institution, and what sort of communications and outreach can you apply to help optimize the chances that they will become an enrollment, a start, an engaged student, and beyond. So that's a real focus of ours, and I think that's a good introduction as a starting point.
Perfect. Awesome, Gary. Appreciate that. Charlie, over to you. Could you share a little more about your background and your work at Kaiser?
Sure, perfect. Thank you for having us on here for sure. Kaiser University, we're predominantly in the state of Utah that people know us. We've got, 21 campuses here, and then we are international with several campuses, 20,000 students. So we're kind of a big school system, level 6 SACS, nonprofit. I've been here 5 months. Previous to this, I was with a group that was more trades driven. Domestically only, we had 20 campuses, but 3 brands. 15 of those campuses were under one brand of Aviation Institute of Maintenance. And then we also had the balance of them being what's called Centura College, and then also Tidewater Tech. Centura College had a little bit of allied health, but all the other campuses were mainly trade driven, either aviation side or welding, HVAC, and things like that. We were fortunate enough to sell it right before the election, actually. So it was a great time for us, and it was a tremendous kind of feather in our cap that Jerry Yeagan started, 15 years ago. But I'm like Gary, I've worked with MDT for a while. I'm a big supporter of Lead Squared. My personality is I want to spend more time on the nurturing side and getting more out of what's already in the funnel, so to speak, than to spend more money to try to get it to the top of funnel and then filter it on down. I'm less likely to be kind of 20 years ago digital side and things like that, where I've really sunk into social, a lot of organic, a lot of SEO work with good content, not blogging content, but good content to drive SEO and things for your website. And like I say, the new school kind of attitude, it seems to be working when you involve that. So I'd love to talk more about that.
Perfect. Fantastic, Charlie. Thank you. So you're all really bringing unique perspectives to the table today. And before we dive into our first topic, I just wanted to give you a quick shout out to Richie, our growth marketing lead, who is running the backstage of this webinar. And Richie will share a poll with all of you in just a moment, asking what's your biggest challenge in improving marketing ROI. So just please take a second, to vote. I think it's right there. So yeah, we'll share the results on the screen in a few minutes to see where everyone stands. Okay, so now let's dive into our opening topic. We know that measuring ROI can feel like like chasing a moving target. It's tricky, it's complex, but it's also critical. So I'd love to hear from each of you. Why is measuring ROI so tricky in career education, and how can schools start to, overcome these hurdles? Nick, I think we can actually start with you, if that's okay.
I love it. Put me on the spot. I love it. Okay, so I think to start that conversation, we need to acknowledge the situation we're in our industry. So first off, we're private education, so our offering is a pretty high ticket price item, if we're willing to admit that to ourselves. And like a car or a house, it's a financial investment, of course, we all understand it, but it's not like an impulse buy to go to McDonald's because you saw it on a billboard. People really need to think, how am I going to afford this? This is anywhere from 20 to 100,000 plus over the course of the training. But another interesting thing is, unlike a car or another high ticket item, there's also an investment in time, right? So it's not even just financially a big ticket item, but I'm investing at minimum several months to years, dedicating myself to going to the school, to studying, to doing hands-on learning, whatever kind of education it is. That's an investment, a huge investment of time and money. So what does that mean for ROI? It means that long funnels, right? You're starting to get exposure to, I didn't even know I had this problem, or I didn't even know how to solve this unhappiness with my income or life satisfaction, that maybe I need to consider education. From there, they're working through a funnel. They need to, even if they're ready to go, they have to talk with their spouse or their family. They need to figure out, how am I going to do this? Do I need to quit work? How are we going to pay the rent while I'm affording school and quitting my job? So we need to acknowledge that all of that is outside our control, but it leads to what? Very long, complicated windows where maybe we generated a student 2 years ago with a paid ad, but they enrolled today. How do you even attribute that, right? So there's a lot of questions that are not easy to solve. And so I think first off, we just need to acknowledge the situation we're in. So I think that's number one. And number two is, again, as an industry, you know, we tend to be a little conservative. We got a lot of regulators breathing down our necks. We're always going, like, I like to joke, I'm a quasi compliance director myself. I'm always, you know, trying to push the envelope, but I also understand, you know, we have to say it just so. We can't use this word. And so we end up with what I feel is stiff marketing, right? And we know marketing works well when we make people feel, right, strong emotions, good or bad. And so we just need to first off acknowledge that's the situation we're in. So I think that's how I would start it, is that we need to kind of figure out what can we do given those parameters.
Hey, Eureka, I'd love to jump in on that too, if you're okay with it. I do think, I hear what Nick's saying. I think we can overcomplicate things a lot, especially, in marketing and when you're in the weeds. But there's two areas that are very functional. There's the conversion side, which is inquiry to application or enrollment, depending on your terminology. And then there's also the yield, which is enrollment to start, which is your start rate. And I think as a marketer, I find it more effective. And again, the thing with marketing is everybody's a marketer. Everybody's a consumer. So everybody thinks that they know how to do it and things like that. So let's just say that right now, everybody's got the best idea. And if you have a CEO that, reads the news, he wanted to do chat, 7 months ago or last year, and why is this not on our website? So you got to take that into consideration too, because everybody's a consumer. But at the end of the day, you got to look at your yield, right? You got to say to yourself, okay, if 100 students are coming in as an applicant and we're yielding out at 60%, so for every 10 we're getting 6, what does that look like? What's their target audience? What's their zip? What's their makeup? And then I always like working backwards to hyper target better. So I don't really look at, some people look at CPE, which is cost per enrollment. Some people look at CPI, which is cost per inquiry. I bring it all the way to CPS, cost per start. So what am I revenue producing from, and how I can do less and get more? So higher conversions, less spend, right? Most of us that are in the marketing world, we live by a percent of revenue, right? And if you're at, 15% revenue, I want to get that down to 7% revenue, which we were very fortunate to do at other companies. And how do you do that? Is it FTE based, but then you affect your margins? So I think the first thing to do is look at your cost per start and what you want to yield with. And then where are those individuals coming from? What's their makeup? What's their zip? Then you can start to build clusters and hyper target. And then you go all the way back to top of funnel on what the ease of that is. Because to me, a successful school is not only revenue targeting or population growth, but also EBITDA. Are you opening up your margin a little bit? And you got two parts of those scales. So I think if you really keep it easy and look at the two sides, you got the conversion side and then the yield side, and then correlate them, but work backwards on how you're doing your acquisition process, how they're coming in. Is the door opening, Henrique? Like I would rather not get a digital and have someone walk in my door. How are you getting to that kind of perfect world situation and working towards that? New Hampshire, was that University of New Hampshire? What is their school? I'm talking about the University of New Hampshire school. Great marketing, program they did 10 years ago. Just there should be a white paper, and there probably is on it, on how they did that. And it was all organic driven, student driven, outcome driven, caring professionals in there. And then it all spilled into their yield, which we all know what happened to them as far as their population growth and their size. So for me, it's CPS and work backwards, and then you can target from there.
Perfect. That's a
To
great
add
perspective.
something there to it as well, tracking ROI, like it's only going to be as tricky as you're going to make it. It doesn't have to be that tricky, and it can scale based on the size of your organization. If you're like a single person marketing department, keep it simple, and you don't have to do anything complicated as far as tracking the status through the life cycle, the enrollment life cycle of the prospect. And just kind of along the lines of what Charlie's talking about, if you can track, if you have your forms that are storing data on what sources are driving your traffic, and that lives with the record, and you can match that back based on status through the life cycle, enrollment status, activity, like are they an active student, and then compare that against how much was spent on that source, you're gonna have a basic but straightforward understanding of how your sources are performing for your institution. And you don't have to get that more complicated, to have basic information that you can make important decisions, like insightful decisions on. From there, you can get more complicated on like attribution modeling and things like that, but it doesn't have to be tricky. So I don't want anybody to be overwhelmed. You could start off simple and work your way up to it. There's no reason not to be. I think I saw in the promo for this that 1 out of every 5 marketers are not like tracking marketing performance. I don't even know how that's possible today. I want to see that. I want to see that report. Like every platform kind of has native analytics in it anyway. So, but it doesn't have to be tricky. If you keep it simple, you're gonna have core piece of information that you'll be able to apply some data-driven decision making on, make the right moves.
Perfect. No, this is great. I think we already covered a little bit of the next topic that I wanted to talk about, which is connecting marketing to enrollment success. Charlie, I believe we already talked about even the metrics that I was going to ask you. But from your experience, can you tell a little bit more about how does marketing impact enrollment, and if possible, maybe sharing a quick example of a marketing effort that really moved the needle based on
Sure.
your experience, not just that like based on your previous also roles as well.
No, yeah, I love it. And I love your background too. I get mesmerized looking out your porch there. Great location spot. Yeah, hand in glove. Enrollment and marketing are almost, as far as I'm concerned, the same department. They're part of the enrollment management team. And, we all know those school groups that you get silo driven, right? Marketing, their accountability result is more inquiries. Then you got enrollment, who their responsibility is good customer service experience and then population growth. And sometimes those two things diverge and you've got competing different end zones or goalposts. So first and foremost, I can't tell you enough how I would never want to work in that environment. You have to work together. You have to communicate. You have to understand who you're seeing, gender relation, where they're coming from, and then you got to share it and understand it better. We went so far, Henrique, as we looked at what our typical student wrote, like what word use do they use? We put it into our copy, because you want to be part of the herd, and they can look at you as part of the success that they want to come to your school. But first and foremost, there's several things that we try to do. If you're converting, let's just say pay-per-click, for example, on the digital side, if you're converting, 5-6%, look at what your hot pockets are, see what you're doing there and see how you can get lift. If you've got PPL, which is still an aggregator, it's still a good use of your time, so to speak. But who's mixed in that pay-per-lead? For me, I'll give some shout outs to one vendor. It's Career Now, right? I know that, out of umpteen, affiliates that I can go to, there's about 3 or so that I really want to work with because I see effort that's not human capital fatiguing, right? We're not in a luxury that we have higher demand and less supply. We have more supply than we have demand. And that's why we have admissions counselors, and we want to give a good service and good customer service. But if I know certain categories are working and I'm not affecting human capital fatigue, and we're not, devaluing the inquiries, or they're having a shelf life issue, then I need to work with marketing on that and how they're targeting, and tell them what I'm seeing so that they can purchase what I want to eat, right? If I'm eating, I don't want broccoli, bring me the steak, so to speak. And so you got skin in the game together. The other thing I'd say is ranking, which a CRM can give you. For a little shout to Lead Squared. CRMs can give us the ability so that we understand in a decile format of what has a higher propensity of converting and what doesn't. That doesn't mean every human isn't important, but we want to be, judicious with our time and our fiduciary responsibility of driving traffic and things like that. And then finally, your geos. Do you have your zoning set up? How's your density? How's your program offering in geography? Some examples that you asked for is, Gary and I, shout out to MDT. And if you don't know who MDT is on this call, you're doing yourself a favor, and you need to pick up the phone right now and call them, because they have a lot of offerings that are very navigatable to any sort of school size and what you're looking for. For me, Obviously for targeting, I needed some help with that. And there's a guy named Ted over there, and Gary was with me, and they helped me look at what we want to tag to. But the example I want to give you is nurturing. And one of the things that Gary's have done over at MDT, and I've been very successful from a recruiting angle of it, is video nurturing. So you take what your inquiries are giving you, and then you put them through a good nurturing, not stock photos and people with perfect teeth and perfect skin tone and something they can't relate to, but you have video. They're used to Instagram. They're used to, all these things they're on, right? These short quips, right? So video nurturing, we were able to lift our conversion and do more with less and have more excited individuals coming through our school because of nurturing techniques from inquiry all the way to start for the most part. And I know Gary has some other clients that even use it for the yield side from start to or from enrollment to start, that gives them a higher yield. And it's not just the yield for us, from an operator perspective, we want graduates, we want outcomes. So I don't care if I'm hitting budgets on the start plan. What I care about is we're retaining them all the way through and we're delivering on our promise for graduates. And what I found with being more focused on that side of it, and the example of nurturing with videos or using techniques in their language, depending on what your demo is, we're pretty much 18 to 35, so that kind of window. Those techniques were not just proven out by hitting and blowing out our start numbers, but our retention maintained. We didn't have our higher attrition, right? But you also have to know your pain points along the ways and fill those gaps with nurturing. Nurturing doesn't start when they start. Nurturing doesn't stop when they start school. The last thing I want to tell you is you have to know your maturity by category or source. For me, as a macro look at it, I knew I had about 30 days, 32 days. So if you look at an X and Y axis, I'm addressing this because one of the top things was enrollment conversion. So if you look at an X and Y axis, I knew that the first 14 days was my highest propensity for converting on a macro look of our categories. But you have to look at all categories. They may be a little different, right? And then I knew from day 15 to day 39, it kind of waned off, but there was still high convertible. And then from day, 35 on or whatever, then I would go into re-nurturing stage or research stage to try to find that needle in a haystack. So I guess what I'm trying to say is those examples, and in particularly in the company we sold, because that's more near and dear to me, we were able to bring our revenue down almost by 40%. Our spend down on revenue down by 40%. We started converting about 6% higher. Our yield went up about 2 or 3%. So the yield didn't go up much, but our conversion did. So the net positive was definitely better. Now we also have luck. Trades were big, right? We came out of COVID, everybody's essential. So we also leveraged that. So if you're in the trade industry, your iron's hot right now. But for other schools, if you put out what you want, you can't build it and they will come, but putting out those techniques to have someone want to join you. And Henrique, just one more thing, because I can overtalk. Efficiency and time to market are what people are looking for now in the research that I've done. It's not tuition and time that people think are the old adage why someone does in school. It's actually not. It's closer to home, and if you can deliver to them an efficient manner, an essential manner that they can join your school, and you can prove time to market so they can get into a good career and get income producing, you will win. So tuition is high if you think it's high, or low if you think it's low, but it really doesn't have a variable on the consumer's mind that we're seeing now in that 18 to 35 range. So hopefully they answer the question.
Perfect. Yeah, no, those are super impressive results, and that's super insightful as well. Thank you for sharing. And Nick, let's pivot to you. At Gurnick Academy, for instance, how does your approach compare to Charlie's? What's similar, what's different, and how do you tie marketing back to enrollment success?
Yeah, so I think video and nurture are definitely big opportunities. Like he mentioned, people are consuming video. There's a saying that, people will skim a lot of text, which we tend to just want to throw it all out there. And sometimes it's much easier to make it digestible with imagery, with videos. So we've really leaned in with social media to kind of widen the funnel and answer those questions. And then we're able to embed those into the enrollment flow with prospective students, as well as in the information that they get. So I think you got to kind of meet the audience where they are. Email is not dead, but it's not the way it used to be. So utilizing the different communication channels and leveraging them to work together. We're working with a young, Gen Z, post-millennial audience that wants hand-holding. Essentially, they want to know what they're expecting next. And again, it goes back to that feeling of anxiety, and can you relieve it as part of that process? Additionally, the buyer personas helped us to better understand, there's a few overarching groups for healthcare education, private healthcare education. You got your high school grads doing more entry-level programs anyone could get into. Those that, during COVID or post-COVID are going, apparently my job is a non-essential job. It closed during COVID. That's kind of nuts. Maybe I need to reevaluate. And then those who are just non-traditional path, whether they just took a non-traditional path with a GED, or they went out to work and now they're looking to come back and kind of advance, and being able to have multiple ways of speaking to your audience. You can't do a one size fits all. Everything from the look, the feel, the approach. Charles threw out a lot of vendors. I guess I need to throw out some. So we use somebody called Virtual Advisor Enrollment Resources. They do these career quiz, right? It's another inquiry source, but it layers a lot of information about the leads we're getting. And one of the things that I think a lot of people glance over, including myself, until I took the time to learn what the heck it meant, was this idea of social personality, right? And the idea that people consume information based on their lens, right? How they want to understand things. And so it's very easy for us to know the nitty-gritty about everything forward and backwards, to throw numbers and time and money and this and that. They want stories. They want to know, I can do this. Going back to Charles talking about, tuition doesn't really matter. It's ultimately, do they understand the investment? They see, their story changing, they're going to be able to pay it off. So it's leveraging that, and that's where the video, the imagery, the communication styles all parallel that and help to support it. And so a big thing we're doing right now is trying to disrupt with our social media to widen that funnel, to get beyond the audience we've just kind of always focused on, because we just need direct lead gen. And that looks like unusual things like, you pull open the TikTok for Gurnick, you might see mannequin testicles popping out, because we're like, this is how sonography works, a little bit of the nitty gritty. And it's relevant, but it's also unusual, right? And it causes people to stop. And we get a lot of inappropriate comments, sure. But, the bigger issue, though, is we're saying, hey, let's pull back the curtain. This is what they're learning in the program. Like, basically, they can kind of take a step back and go, can I see myself doing this? It's a little bit of fun, a little bit of humor, but we're trying to just open that up, because I think people want transparency. They want authenticity. So that's an example of kind of a more recent campaign we're doing. Not necessarily money behind it, but just sort of trying to disrupt, right? Trying to get people to stop and see that, oh, this is more than just, you're just a nurse, you do this, but really trying to give it a feeling and a personality that they can see for themselves.
Perfect. Yeah, no, that's really, really interesting. Thank you for sharing. And I believe what you said and what Troy also mentioned early actually sets the stage perfectly for our next topic that I want to discuss, which is how to eliminate waste in marketing spend. So let's talk about the money side of things. Marketing budgets are not infinite. Everyone knows that, and every dollar counts. So Gary, I believe this is more your area of expertise. If you can answer, what are the biggest financial leaks you see in education marketing, and how can schools plug those leaks to get more out of their budget?
Yeah, no question. The biggest source of financial leaks that we see relates to the uncontacted inquiries and engagement with inquiries through the student life cycle. So let me frame it as this. Let's say each new lead is costing you $150, and it takes 10 leads to generate a start. So you got essentially a 10% conversion rate. So you're going to have, it's going to cost you about $1,500 per start. That's going to be, but that also means that 9 out of 10 of your contacts that you purchased are going uncontacted or unconverted through the process. So you have essentially purchased $1,350 worth of data that needs to be worked. Like, this is a massive opportunity for it to be worked. And to kind of piggyback a little bit off of what Charlie was getting at earlier about how marketing and admissions need to be really tight. I'm going to say that marketing is uniquely positioned as a department within your organization to play a support role through the entire life cycle of the student. And this is admissions and financial aid and academics and career services. If you've got any alumni programs or anything like that, marketing is uniquely positioned to be that support team throughout the life cycle. And I think that's something that isn't considered as often is the deeper somebody gets through their student journey, the more valuable they are, both for themselves, their future, and developing themselves and growing as a person, and for the school's financial health. Because there is zero, if we're talking about ROI, there is zero ROI until somebody's active. There's zero. There's no revenue generating until they're active. And that's a really important consideration. So what would you do? We talk sometimes about reverse prioritizing marketing budgets. And this isn't to take anything away from lead gen. You need leads to fuel the growth of your institution. But when you've got those coming through and you start analyzing, like, what is the most efficient way that I can generate positive ROI, you're going to find it's in retention strategies. You're going to find that it's in re-enrollment activities. So people, students who have dropped, and running campaigns to get them to re-enroll. And then work your way backwards, because those are going to be the easiest, highest converting prospects. Okay, you got campaigns in place for those. Let's look at those enrollments. Like, people are canceling out. So what can we do to optimize that? What can we do to optimize interviews and shows to appointments that are scheduled? And you work your way back. So when it comes to leakage, you work the data that you've got, because you're spending a lot of money to build that list, and make sure you put it to work. And admissions is going to do their thing. You can run and support. You can set up automated campaigns with compelling communications that go out to support admissions efforts. But there's a huge, I would say it's a huge missed opportunity for most schools. And I'm not even going to say it's the marketing department's, I'm going to say this is like an executive decision. Marketing should be able to support broader than just lead gen. And often that's where it lives exclusively. There's enormous opportunity to grow and get positive ROI by expanding efforts beyond that. So I'll throw that out there and hear feedback and maybe riff off of what Charlie and Nick have to say.
I agree, Gary. The most frustrating thing from anybody that's done this for a long time, and Gary's like 60 years old or something, he's been doing this forever, but is the inability to work with in a human environment those inquiries. And there's great tools out there now. I'm not a big dialer type person, especially predictive dialers in our world, because I feel like it takes the human out of it, but they are very necessary if you need some good cadence driven techniques to engage, right? The thing that a school should be concerned with is engagement, not starts, not apps, not anything, but engagement, because that's where everything can tell you something. So if you look at the top tip of the spear, like a triangle at the top is engagement. What are you doing on the front of that triangle to support engagement? And for us, we're a big believer culturally, and in all school groups I've been with, is in that human interaction. No matter how much AI is out there and Tesla robots and everything else, human interaction is still important, and I don't believe will go away. So what are you doing on the front to get to that engagement? And to Gary's point, once you have engagement, what are you doing on the back end process to continue that engagement and those emotions, which is all the way through graduation? And if you're an operator to school, like say you're a campus president or a director of admissions or student service, like a dean, those type of things, what is your involvement from the beginning of that? In working with marketing, working what you're seeing, working with who's in your class, looking at your drops. How many people cluster their drops and find out what categories or sources they came from? What are their zips at? Is it a transportation issue? Is it, there's so many things you can learn. But to Gary's point, there's a tactical reason because we want graduates, but there's strategic reason to work it all the way through to be better efficient at what we're doing with our time. And that is the most important thing to me. And I would think that's the most important thing to everybody here, because we don't want to work harder. That old cliche, work hard and smarter, which I think is silly. You should just work and then have a good life. But at the same time, we want to return our investment, which also is humans involved. Nick said it at the beginning of this, you're not buying a shirt. You're not buying something tangible you can take with you. You're investing in the future that no one can take away from you, which is your knowledge. And then you're granting a new career, then you have community enhancement, then you have economic progress and things like that. So you have to really make sure each department is understanding what the real goalpost is, regardless of their individual department accountability and how they correlate and connect together. And Gary, I think I'm trying to support what you're saying. I hope that wasn't detracting from it, but Gary's probably one of the smartest people I've met. And he's wicked right on this. For you Northerners that are on the phone, he is absolutely wicked right on what he's saying.
Thank you, Charlie.
There was an awkward pause now, so I feel like I should say a joke or something. Maybe it didn't make sense. So.
This was great, Charlie. Thank you. Nick, anything else you wanted to add, or we can move to the next topic?
Yeah, no, I mean, the only thing I'll add to that, because I'm definitely feeling out of my league. These guys are awesome. I'm learning. We're all learning. But I think that's a good point. Marketing is always thought of as just lead gen, but even then there's the explicit cost. Let's just talk paid ads, because that's the explicit marketing cost, right? You have a budget for that and you're spending it. It's a sunk cost that, you can optimize with your keywords and targeting and all that good stuff. But with the spend that's already happened along the way, you don't want to then feel like, okay, well, we need to just get as many leads out of that as we can, because, and this is a conversation I have all the time where, people are focused on quantity of leads. It's a feel good number. Like, oh man, we got 200. Okay, we got a lot of people to work with. And I go, what if you had 50 leads, but the same enrollments or more? Wouldn't that be better? You're not wasting your time along with that spend. And so, for example, one thing I've really focused on is screening, qualifying those leads up front, giving them a feeling of, look, there's kind of a level of exclusivity here that kind of makes them a little uncomfortable. And they're like, oh gosh, I'm getting screened out. You don't even want me to like inquire and talk to me first. And I think that does a couple things, right? One, it doesn't further degrade spend in terms of your manpower and their hours, right? They're able to be more efficient, like Gary was saying, with the leads that need to be re-nurtured back in as a re-enroll or get them through the application process, things like that. But also, if you have programs that have specific requirements, like for example, we have programs where they need to have a certain education or they need to be in a certain role. We, for example, will have some specialists in admissions that will work with those. We don't want to send them 100 people that 99 of them are never qualified, and then they have to keep rerouting them to someone else. And the more we can use a combination of good interventions and sophistications right from the beginning, whether that's on the inquiry source or as it comes into the lead squared system. But there's a lot of not remembering that, yeah, it's not explicit, like you're paying for your people, you need admissions people, but there is a cost, right? It's a zero-sum game. They're either spend time on junk or they're spend time on the leads that matter. And so just as a reminder, as much as it's about being efficient with the lead gen you're doing, it's just as effective with your screening process, your validation of the info. Make sure that the right leads go to the right people and that they're basically primed with the process of like, here's how we can make the most out of the time. Like, here's the stuff you should start thinking about getting together so we can have a meaningful conversation instead of, well, I don't really know what I want to do. How does this work? What questions do you have? And everyone is making the most of their time. And so I think that's kind of a leakage that it's kind of easy to miss because it's not a line item per se for marketing, but it absolutely is downwind of an ineffective setup for marketing for admissions.
No, totally agree. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that perspective. Everyone, just one thing, we're gonna open up for Q&A in the last 10 minutes, so feel free to drop your questions in the chat here before we move to the last topic. So, Gary, you talked about, putting the data to work. Charlie talked about, the importance of human interactions, and I wanted now to, open up to the whole panel for some big picture thinking, if you may. So we know that new technologies, we talked about that, how they're changing the game in marketing. So I have got two questions for you all. So the first one will be, how can those new technologies help track performance and cut the waste? And the second is, how can we, and actually why should we connect marketing, admissions, and enrollment data? Let's go around the table here. Who can go first?
I'll always speak before Gary, so I'll go ahead and go first. Nick, I don't know you as well yet, so I
I
can't
like
say
to
anything
contradict
weird.
you.
What's that? And then you'll contradict it. That's right. That's right. So new technology, it's a good question, and I'd love to hear, Nick and Gary's thoughts on this. But, simple things, if you're using a GUI that's coming from your database or something like we use Power BI, I use a lot of technology to do a lot of the sorting for me. So I'll put prompts in there to identify, lower converting, or, we've got, like I say, 21 campuses in Florida. I'll do some searches with that technology, which means it's more efficient for me. I don't need an assistant to put that together for me. I'm more of a conceptual guy, so I don't need an FTE to do that for me. I also don't need, if I'm a marketer of one, like a lot of our school groups have, or few, I don't need to spend 2 hours pulling all the data and then making decisions on it. I can put some prompts in, through various things. We use Copilot for the Power BI side, but it helps me take data and slice it up extremely quick, and puts it in a digestible way where I can actually do what I'm good at, which is taking that data and creating a narrative for effectiveness. The other things out there is just there's tools and how you reach people and where they're at. We've mentioned social. You got TikTok, and I think Gary's going to put in his offer for TikTok before Saturday's here, so he'll probably be the new owner of TikTok. But you've got WhatsApp. You got so many different tools out there. So it depends on what you can use on what they're going. Like the Wayne Gretzky thing, you go where the puck is going. Right. And so us as marketers and leaders, we want to understand it, not be a trendsetter, but understand where it's going so we can use those things that are out there in technology. Those other things, we're using a lot of AI products to increase engagement, not to replace a human from the engagement side, but increase the likelihood of reaching that person for engagement. And there's many techniques that you can use with machine learning, with a lot of, taking, sheets and sheets and sheets of data to tell you what you could be doing better at it, instead of, an Excel spreadsheet and a Rolodex and something else. So I think, for me, for the first question is leveraging the data with technology and human interest and interactions with technology to save me time so I can make the decisions. I don't want to sit in my office to create that and then make decisions. I want to save my brain power to use that and make the decisions. And your second question was, what was your second question?
The second question I had here was, how can we actually connect marketing, admissions, and enrollment data, and
Well,
why?
first of all,
Before you answer that, Charlie,
I'm
I
going
just
to
want
give
to
that to
highlight.
Gary anyways. I'm going to yield my time to Gary. You didn't let me do it. I'm going to yield my time to Gary. And I'll say to your second question, just do it. There should be no need for an example. You just have to do it. So, Gary, I'll yield the floor to you.
I was looking for a way to contradict you, but I actually am going to highlight something you said, which I think was a really good use case of AI today. If you're using any tool, it's not just Power BI that's got Copilot built in, but there are other tools like that. It's a tremendous way to understand your data. And you can interact with it. You can have your data either live within the Power BI environment or whatever system you're using, and then just ask questions like, what is my cost per lead? What is my cost per start? And it'll review it and give you that information back. It's a really amazing way of interacting with information that can be complex. Like data, I always get a kick out of data when it comes to, we talk about performance and everything, because I refer to reports as like the Bible. Everybody interprets it a different way. So like you'll look at the same data and everybody's kind of got a different perspective on what it's actually saying. So using tools like that is really helpful to kind of like get everybody on the same page. And then one other thing I was going to throw out as far as technology is not new technology, but I'm going to say it's underutilized in going back to what I was talking about earlier, filling in the gaps where there's leakage and how marketing can support with communications through the student life cycle. If you're a lead squared user, which I think most people probably are on this call, but most CRMs have it implemented. There's a terrific automation platform, and you leverage that. I see that usually it's built for like some emails that go out, but there's a lot you can do with it to build some robust campaigns that are trigger based on student status and interaction and all kinds of stuff that you can do. So great technology to help automate the process. That's underutilized. I see that widely underutilized. So I'd say leverage that to a different level than that I see most usually do. So those are the suggestions. And then I lost what the next question was.
Perfect. I'm just going to open up for Nick first, and then we can move to the next question.
Go ahead.
Nick, any contradicting views that you'd like to share?
I mean, first off, I feel a little left out. I wish I knew this was a duo comedy routine. I would have brought my Laurel, so my Laurel Hardy routine would land a little more, but I'm trying to keep up with these guys, so we'll, keep it going. So technology and using it. So funny enough, I'm in San Diego for a couple conferences, one marketing, one education. So it's very interesting dichotomy. And in the marketing conference, overload on AI. I mean, there's so many exciting things. And basically, it's limited by your own mind and creativity. But they said that, with all the fears that come with it, and let's be honest, our own, would-be students, our employees, they're all trying to figure out, is this going to replace us? Is this going to make my life better? Are they going to expect 10 times the work out of me? And they likened it to when Microsoft Office came out and the idea like, oh, this is just going to replace workers, right? Like who today says, oh man, yeah, Microsoft, Excel sheets replaced us, right? But they said that if you didn't use those tools and you pulled out like a yellow notepad and you just started doing calculations by hand, you'd be fired, and rightfully so. And I think the idea then is whether it's AI, whether it's some other latent great thing, the technology is a means to an end, right? It's not to replace us. It's not to, necessarily, there's a lot of questions about, well, if everyone uses it, it's all going to be the same, right? And if all of it's the same, but that's where, however you want to talk about it, like as a soul or whatever, but we're human beings and there's a uniqueness that AI is trying to impersonate, right? So the technology is just a solution-based tool. We add the flavor to it in terms of who we are and the approach we're trying to take with brand and tone, and we're trying to identify what's out there and how do we disrupt it. How do we create something that is unique and is a feeling? Because at the end of the day, we're more illogical than not. I mean, Charles and Gary makes it sound like, like we're all matter of fact, but let's be honest, at the end of the day, we're all hormone-fueled teens just dealing with emotions, anger, frustration, anxiety. Like, am I going to look like an idiot on this training? Let's be honest. I've been having that feeling, right? And so acknowledging that human element is part of the chaos, but it's also part of the opportunity. And technology is just an ends to that. Social media is just an ends of posting content to show that off that personality. Email is just a means to communicate when it's 3 a.m. I'm not emailing a lead at 3 a.m. I don't care what you pay me, right? So technology is that means to the end. So embrace it, test it. There's no right or wrong, but leverage what we do have an advantage on, which is we're creative, we're emotional, we are able to connect because our students are not algorithms. They're not data. They're not aggregations. They're not calculations. They're human beings. They're Jane and Joe, and they're wondering, how am I going to afford to feed my family? And is my career on the chopping block because AI is going to replace it? Robots are going to replace it. Neuralink or something else is going to replace it. And as long as we remember that, that's ultimately what matters.
Perfect. Yeah, this is great. This goes back to what Charlie was talking about, not replacing the human interactions. And I feel I totally agree with that. The other question that I had, I think Charlie already said, don't overthink, just do it. But it was about how can we and why should we actually connect marketing admissions and enrollment data. If you guys have any additional thoughts, we can talk about, or we can move forward to the Q&A.
I'll just say one thing because I didn't want to do Q&A, but I'm just joking. They need to be together for things like, if you don't know this terminology, feel free to reach out or whatever, or find out. But gross, marketing needs to understand what gross is. They need to understand where that gross application is coming from and how it's driven. They need to understand yield, so they understand what type of volume they need to bring to you in a responsible manner, so we're yielding what we need to hit our population's gross. They need to understand how many inquiries that an admissions person needs per week, so that they can do a successful call cadence if they're doing it for you in text campaigns. An example of that for me is, I know that if I give a certain admissions person more than 23 inquiries per week, they'll have diminishing returns because they can't get through the new they've got, working their old, and then also working the older, right? Or their appointment sets no shows, or their interviews no app, having a good succinct things. And if you guys are not on the same page, then, one of them's playing cricket and the other one's playing hockey, and you've got to be on the same field together, so to speak. So that's just a plug for that.
Perfect. Thank you, Charlie. Just opening up for the audience here. The first question we have is actually product related, about Lead Square. Someone is asking if are Lead Square automation tools easy to locate and experiment with? If so, what's the best way to get started? So yeah, I would say it's pretty straightforward, pretty easy to locate. We have a central dashboard that you can see all the tools and the automation tools as well. The best way to get started would be connecting with me or Richie. We can follow up after the call, send you a demo, or even set up a call. In terms of more open-ended questions, there is one here. What is the biggest challenge you've seen in aligning marketing strategies with enrollment goals, and how can schools overcome it? And we have another one that I think also ties to this one, which is, what's one quick win that schools can implement right away to boost their marketing ROI? Any like easy lift, anything that you guys can share? I think that's what everyone wants to know, right? The million-dollar question.
They can pay Gary later. That's all I was going to say. Call Gary. That's your quick hit right there. I'll just say on the marketing side, just real quick, is you just have to do it. If you have a CEO that's not on board with it, you both need to go together and talk about breaking those silos down. And again, it's an enrollment management team. It's not the marketing department, the VP of admissions department. It's not that. Those days are gone. It's one enrollment department. So your board needs to get behind that. Your CEO needs to get behind that, and your executives. And to the second question, call Gary.
Nailed it, Charlie. Well done. I couldn't agree more with Charlie. I mean, yeah, it's tough. Every school has a different dynamic, and even like you'll work with institutions and they'll say, okay, well, the marketing team is held accountable to like a mutual cost per enrollment or cost per start goal along with admissions. And then what you see is that when push comes to shove, it comes down to lead gen. It comes down to lead volume. It comes down to cost per lead. And that just really comes from the top. Like you'll feel the dynamics. And I'm not saying every school is like this, but it often is the case. So if this is not coming from the top, that there needs to be real alignment between marketing and admissions and other departments, because marketing can support through the life cycle, and they truly should. Do the best you can, as like if you're like a marketing director type role, do the best you can to initiate it yourself with your admissions counterpart. Work to build that and nurture a relationship, and that'll start to break down the silos, because you've got to work cooperatively together. It's focusing on lead gen is one of the most. It's a very short-sighted approach to growth, and you lose a lot of visibility into what really matters most, both to your school and to the students who you're serving. So I echo what Charlie said there. As far as one takeaway, I'm going to say this is a really quick takeaway that almost everybody could do immediately. Your thank you pages are one of the biggest missed opportunities that your institution probably has. And if you're like most groups out there, your thank you page probably says something like, and what I mean by thank you page, somebody fills out a form, they hit submit, they land on a conversion thank you page that says, thank you for your interest in XYZ school, and admissions rep will contact you shortly. And then it's like, that's where most of your traffic goes. You have an incredible opportunity to turn a passive inquiry, somebody who's like just passed data over your way and is waiting to hear back from you, into a proactive inquiry. So what you could do is just throw on, what's your next CTA? What do you want that prospect to do? And just make that a button on your page and turn your thank you page into an environment where you can turn someone proactive. There's a takeaway, pretty easy to implement.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like we have the perfect solution. Not sure if the audience or you guys are familiar with. We have Flow Stack. That's pretty much
Flow Stack. Awesome.
Yeah,
It's awesome. Hey, there's a really good question coming up, Henrique, that I think I'd love to hear Gary and Nick, and I'd love to address it too. That just came up.
Perfect. Yeah, let me just read the questions about storytelling. And we have Claire here asking, what role does storytelling play in enrollment marketing and how can we leverage? And she also asked, what type of video content is most effective for engaging prospective students? I think those will be the last two questions because we're almost at time here. So
I'll hit it just real quick and then you guys go. First of all, with storytelling, you've got to talk like your audience. Don't talk like you're 50 years old. You've got to speak in that language. So I would do heavy research on what word use they're using, how they're using it. Be real. The one word that you'll hear always is be authentic. Anybody that's authentic driven in anything they do is very successful. What type of video content? Again, real, authentic. What we chose to do, Gary and I, through this video nurturing, because he was our agency of record and was a great partner, is that we use real people, real graduates, where they're working, messed up teeth, unironed clothes, but someone can relate to them and then they can understand that I can do this, I can be part of this. It's very tribe driven, and that vibe you gives off builds your tribe, so to speak. So anything with video content, the most effective is very authentic and very real, very raw, not scripted, not movie quality type thing, very shaky. All that stuff resonates because it matches what they're already looking at. I think the average is 6 to 7 hours a day people are on social in that demo, so you have to relate it to that, but it also can't be whitewashed with everything else, so you have to make it stand out better, which is the authenticity and what they want. They want outcomes. They want to know what they're going to be doing, sitting at a park bench, drinking a beer or whatever they do and having fun. They care more about that than they do, wearing a smock or doing this in your school. They already know that part of it. You've got to show them what life is like after that, and that's what they want to see, to me, and I've got the data to prove that supports it. So that's that for me.
I'm going to say messed up teeth and wrinkly shirts, that's optional for the videos, so you can do that. But yes, organic's important, but it might change a little bit based on what stage is this prospect in. Like, are they early? Is this like an awareness campaign, or is this somebody who's an active student or somebody who dropped and you're trying to re-enroll them? So you might change the way that you're positioning and using video based on that. What sort of storytelling? There's a build that we do. We call it a virtual assistant program, where this is somebody, we use personalized video. So we take data that we have on a prospect and we generate a video specific to that individual. So it'll say, hey, Charlie, just wanted to let you know your appointment's scheduled today at this date and time. Look forward to seeing you there. If you got any questions, connect with us at the button below or something like that. And so this story that we do is we try to build an assistant that lives through the life cycle of the student, that helps support and guide them through key milestones. And this is meant to support admissions efforts, not replace admissions efforts, live kind of concurrently to those. So that's a tool that we use. That's one of the stories that we tell, and we try to use it as a relationship building device. Yeah, I said it. So I think there's a short answer. We're at 2, so turn it over to you, Henrique.
Perfect. Just Nick, anything you'd like to add? Thank you, Gary.
I know I'm gonna have to just start jumping in. I feel like these guys are just awesome. But yeah, so I mean there's a couple rounds of questions, right? One, what is the quick win? I don't know what you guys do or don't do. I will say that I look at competitors, I look at the big players, the University of Phoenixes and whatnot, and I test everything like they said, to fill out the form, see the thank you page, sign up for the email. Like what are they doing? How do we compare and contrast? Because again, there's best practices, but if everyone's doing it, you're not going to stand out. How are you any different, right? So a level of, you got to know your audience forward and backwards. And obviously everyone here, I am 100% confident, has been doing this a long time. You know your business forward and backward. You're talking to these students. You're engaging with them. You know it. Leverage that. Don't worry about what the best practices are. Don't worry what someone else is doing. You know your audience. You know what they care about. You know where they are. You know how they think. You know how they feel. So yeah, the quick wins around that. Again, leverage what you know about your own audience. If they're on a certain channel but not somewhere else, who cares if your competitor is on TikTok and you're not? If your audience isn't there, why would you waste the time, right? Talk about leakage. So knowing your audience, and then the strategy flows from there. And I would say, and to bridge that two sets of questions, storytelling can actually take place with this very conversation. It's so easy to get bogged down with numbers and data again, but understanding algorithms and reporting represent people, right? It's ultimately, these are individuals that make up the aggregated data, right? And being able to tell that story of what's going on, whether there's a certain part of your funnel that just has massive leakage or certain channels that deliver nothing. Those are going to be the quick wins, and tell that through a story. Maybe they can't get a hold of you because you're going back and forth on trying to set up appointments. Intervene with a booking solution that integrates with your calendar. It's that simple. You're getting a lot of leads you can't get a hold of. Have you tried calling from your work number and discovering maybe it's flagged as spam because you make 100 calls a day from that number and the carrier goes, hey, I'm sure you think your calls are important, but people are flagging you as spam, right? It can be that simple. Like, pretend you're a customer, go through the experience. So storytelling, how does it play a role? We're all essentially the same. Our competitors in our school are essentially the same. Accreditors require the same thing, same time, relatively same tuition. So what's going to stand out? Your personality, your brand. Who are you? And telling that story yourself and with your students. Yes, there's a level of cynicism that comes from, oh, it's Gurnick Academy talking about Gurnick. It, no matter how unscripted it looks and feels. And that's where you leverage your populations. You make life so fun that the user-generated content flows from it. You're so unusual that people are like, what the heck is going on over there? Are they losing their mind? And they start talking about it. And when it comes from the reviews and testimonials, for example, 95% of people will trust a perfect stranger, but because it's a review on Yelp and not coming from you, the business. That's insane. You don't know that person leaving that review. But we trust people because instinctually we think, I'm a person, they're a person with their experience and their feelings. Like, I'm going to trust that. I'm not going to trust a brand I don't know. So video can be effective by telling that story with the ultimate medium. You have audio, you have visuals, in terms of how you film it, the tone of it, the length of it, the content of it. But again, all these are details. Always goes back to who is your audience and, what do they think? How do they feel? It's got to start there. It can't start with, oh, I read an article or, oh, this is what our competitor's doing. And I think Charles mentioned that earlier about, a CEO going to a conference or seeing someone goes, oh yeah, we got to use this. It's like, maybe not, but you got to know your audience and then flows from there.
Perfect. Thanks, Nick. Well, I think we're a little over time, but I just want to again to thank our incredible speakers, Charlie, Gary, and Nick, for bringing their expertise and energy to this conversation. I had a lot of fun, which is not usual for a webinar. So thank you so much. If you enjoyed this webinar, keep an eye out for more for LeadSquare. We're all about helping schools like yours to drive results, And for now, thank you so much again for joining us. It's been a pleasure. And have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much. And again, Nick, Gary, and Charlie, thank you again. I had a great time. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Take